Yes, my name is Nick Winers. I'm the head of marketing at the Tank Museum in Dorset. And I don't know if you've visited. If you haven't, why not? But we house the world's finest collection of tanks. And we're also the Museum of the Royal Tank Regiment and the Royal Armoured Corps. And what I'm going to be talking to you about is how we've used social media to generate revenue, and specifically how we turned our online followers to sales during the first lockdown, which came about as a result of the COVID-19 virus. So this is really more about organic social media marketing than it is about traditional fundraising. And as you'll see, the rules are really quite different. So on the 30th of March 2020, I think we were all presented with a very similar situation. We were shut. We had absolutely no income. And I'm thinking, no, that's not a title, although that's very much what we were thinking at the time. Now, one of the most important parts of our social media strategy, and in fact our entire marketing strategy really, is our YouTube channel. Today we've got over 325,000 subscribers. Last year we generated 16 million views. So it's a really important part of our objective of making ourselves more famous. But as a result of social distancing and the fact we were closed and weren't supposed to be coming into the office and that kind of thing, we weren't able to work and film as normal, but we still needed to create content for our YouTube audience, which are expecting at least one video a week from us. And we, of course, given our current situation, or the situation as it was then, we needed to increase our earnings. And the only really meaningful way of doing that was our online retail. Now, in 2019, our online retail really wasn't very big at all. We were basically turning over about £3,500 a month. And whilst that was, not a bad figure, we were actually quite happy with it at the time. It certainly wasn't going to make a material difference to our fortunes during the lockdown. And we really were aware that we really needed to quickly do something to increase the amount of money we were able to take online. Now, as a bit of background, the Tank Museum has long embraced social media. And the reason we've embraced social media is because we recognized very early on that it allows you to build your brand, build advocacy, build audiences, and build loyalty among those audiences. But to be successful on social media, you need to do two things. First of all, you of course need to build an audience, and we've built our audience by creating engaging content. And we'll talk more about content in a moment. By signposting, and that basically means pointing all your offline communications, putting in cues to make people aware of your online social media presence, by encouraging interactivity with your audiences online, by answering their questions and posing questions and getting a bit of a two-way conversation going, by regular posting so that people know what to expect and it keeps the interest up in your social media channels, by gaining trust. And what that basically means is, because we're the Tank Museum, people have decided to follow us because we're going to talk about tanks. That means we're not going to talk about anything else, obviously. So we're not going to talk about Love Island and that kind of thing, no matter how big the interest may be. And we've also developed some quite useful sort of online partnerships as well, which has allowed us to kind of, cross-fertilize and share audiences. And the second thing you need to do is create good content. Now, our kind of flagship piece of content that we've done on our YouTube channel is called Tank Chats, and that's basically what you can imagine is a quite sort of formal documentary style where we basically look at all the different tanks in our collection. So in our opinion, good content needs to be authentic. And obviously, as museums, well, authentic storytelling is very much in our nature. We've got stories to tell with authenticity that most brands could only ever really dream of. It needs to be useful, and that means obviously it needs to be sort of educational or fulfill some form of purpose. As we all know on Twitter, there's an awful lot of junk out there. It needs to be consistent, and what that means is not just consistent in how often it's being delivered, but also consistency in, if you like, the tone of voice. And it needs to be accurate. I mean, obviously museums, that goes without saying, and it needs to be original. So we don't want to be ripping off what other YouTube channels are doing. And of course, as museums, it needs to be simple, which means it needs to be relatively easy to generate, produce, and put up there. So the question that we had for ourselves on the 30th of March 2020 was, how can we create engaging, watchable YouTube content that will conform to our own standards of authenticity, usefulness, accuracy, originality, simple and consistency, whilst asking for financial support from our viewers in a way which doesn't alienate them? Now, that was a really important question for us, because we needed to get our supporters to help us financially, but had never had to lean on our online audiences before. So we just didn't really know how they were going to react. Now, having spent a few years sort of building and growing our online audiences, you actually become a little bit protective of them as well. They feel quite sort of precious. You don't want to do anything to upset the apple cart. It's a little bit like trying to grow orchids, I suppose. It all feels very fragile. And as we all know, at worst, social media audiences can be very fickle and a bit factional, and they're certainly going to speak their mind if they do something that you don't like. So for us, it was certainly a pretty risky moment in terms of our sort of social media journey. So how we messaged this and how we packaged the requests for support was going to be really, really important. Now, we didn't feel it was right at that particular time to turn to our supporters and say, look, put your hands in your pockets because we're going to be in trouble here, in sort of like a one-off, pity video. Because we felt that everyone was going to be in the same boat, to be honest with you. A lot of people, of course, at that time were going to be very much fearing for their own livelihoods. At the same time, overselling in social media, in content, because of course content is not advertising, and that's a really important distinction, is something which would really be rejected by social media audiences. If they give you their time, they really don't want to be advertised to. So, and that kind of thing can really harm the trust that your audience have placed in you. So as you can see, we had a risky moment that we felt we really needed to think about to ensure we got it right. And we came up with a format. We had these two issues. How do we raise funds? How do we keep delivering content with the restrictions in place? Which is simple, easy, authentic, etc., etc. And the format we came up with is probably best crudely described as follows. If you take the question and answer format that you see in question time and mix it up a little bit with the slick product placement format you see with QBC, what you ended up with was what we called our Curators Q and A. Now, the QA, particularly on YouTube, is a relatively well tried and tested YouTube creator format. It allows us to tick the authentic, authoritative, and useful boxes. It's also, by its very nature, highly interactive. And it would also be a lot less formal than our normal kind of, straight down the camera and almost documentary tank chat style. So that would provide us with a more relaxed conversational approach where we would be able to talk openly with our audience directly about the challenges we were facing as an organization during the lockdown. And this created new opportunities for us to drop in what I would call more casual appeals for support. We didn't have to do the hard sell with, oh, it's terrible, we've got no income, we've got no revenue. And we were just able to basically, we're going to be able to keep people up to speed with what was going on, what we were thinking about it, and how it might affect them. And then, if they were keen to, how they might be able to support. So in that context, we felt we would be able to earn the right to sell to our audiences by highlighting and recommending some of the products that we sold in our online shop, or at least that was the theory. So what I want to do now, if it works, is, it's not going to work, is it? Fantastic. Oh, yes, it is. There we go. What I'm going to do now is just give you a very brief flavor of how these videos actually worked, to give you a sense of. Now, I probably haven't shared my sound. I don't know. Have I shared sound? Can you hear anything at the moment? No, I'll have to interpret what's being said. But basically, as you can see, it's a very, very simple setup. What we have there is David Willey, our curator, who is, a fantastic asset. He's a great presenter, a natural communicator, and that gives us a great head start from the get-go. But you can see the set format, very, very simple. He's literally filming it himself at home. You can see he's actually in his garden at the moment, and he's just literally sat there at a table with a few of the Tank Museum online shop products sort of laid out around him, and you can see he's got his notebooks because he's going to be getting stuck in and answering some of the audience's questions. I'm going to nudge through as well, so you can kind of see. You won't be able to hear the questions that he's being posed, but This particular edition, which I selected at random, the questions we noticed were really quite in-depth and really quite interesting. There was somebody who was asking about the ethics and philosophy behind restoration versus conversation, and the ship of Theseus debate comes up. So these aren't really inane questions. These are real enthusiasts. These are our loyal supporters and really keen to, sort of engage with a curator, which is, quite a special thing to do. David presents all our YouTube videos, so he is, if you like, a YouTube persona. So this goes on for quite a while. You can see it's a relatively long video, 28 minutes in there, and he's still going strong. Interestingly, what he does around this point, you'll see, is one of the questions comes in. You won't be able to hear the question, but quite cleverly, he picks up one of the books that we sell in our online shop and refers the answer to that particular question. And actually, that's a Haynes manual, which is a licensed product that David is the author of. So it's even quite a legitimate piece of product placement. And then as we get towards the end of the video, we're getting towards 40 odd minutes here. He's still going. Fantastic. Talking about some of the products that might lift people's moods at that particular time during lockdown. He's got the Tank Museum branded chocolate there, which was being sold in our online shop at that particular time. And just down the right there, if you can see him, he even made a star of his pet dog Finn, who in many ways became more popular than David as this series went out. And in fact, we ended up sending a little Finn glove puppet, which is very bizarre. But in many ways, that sort of highlights just how successful this kind of YouTube personalization can become. Now you can see David's tucking into a bottle of Tank Museum beer as well at the end. Bit more product placement, even more. And you can see there he's donned a pair of the Tank Museum slippers as he talks to the dog and drinks his beer. So there we go. That's a very brief look at how our Q&A videos were delivered and how they were structured. How were they received by the audience? This is, of course, the most important piece. Well, all you have to do to answer that question is go onto YouTube and have a look at the comments that the viewers made about those particular videos. And I've just bashed a few up here at random. And you can see that, well, straight away, really, the benefits of having kind of spent time building and curating that loyal community online. People really, really enjoyed what they were seeing. And they appreciated the Q&A videos, but they also understood and completely accepted the very soft and very human way in which we were looking to earn their financial support. And I do say earn rather than ask, because that creates a very different dynamic. And that's something which is very important on social media. You can't go on there and basically demand, you've got to kind of earn the right. And it's all about kind of building trust and building a relationship with your viewers. And that's clearly something that came to the fore during this lockdown period. So here are a few key facts. I don't know how I'm doing for time. Am I okay for time at the moment? Must be all right. Cool. So here are a few key facts about the videos and how they were consumed. So we did 24 episodes of these Q&A videos between April and September, and obviously we started literally on the first week of April, and we drew them to a close in September because, interestingly, we did notice that they started to lose their effectiveness slightly when lockdown was relaxed in July and people started to go back to their normal lives. But what we actually did was we continue to do them, but only for our Patreon audience. And I'll talk a little bit about what Patreon is in a moment, but it can probably be very briefly described as an online regular giving platform, which is very closely linked to sort of a YouTube presence or a online social media content creator presence. And what we actually did was kind of said, look, we're not going to be doing these anymore, but if you'd like to continue seeing Q&As and that kind of thing with the curator, all you have to do is join the Patreon stream, which will cost you as little as $1 a month. And actually, we picked up a huge amount of patrons that way, which was good news. Each video was 40 to 60 minutes long. So again, they were meaty, entertaining, good content. We achieved this entire series of 24 episodes, achieved 744,535 views overall, which is a pretty significant number, I'm sure you'll agree. In terms of the watch time that generates, and this is, of course, information which is available in the analytics part of YouTube, it generated us 230,300 hours of watch time, which can be translated into years. It's 26 years. Absolutely phenomenal. All sat there watching a man sat behind a desk talking about tanks. Takes all sorts, but that's our loyal audience. And it says a lot about how interesting David makes those videos as well. In terms of the key outcomes, now it's very, very difficult to sort of attribute sales directly to any sort of social media activity. Of course, you know, this was literally at the very beginning of our online, sort of growing our online sales, but we are able to say that these videos generated at least £30,000 worth of sales. It could actually be as much as 60,000. It's just, it's very, very, very difficult to basically create direct attribution between one or the other. It's much easier to attribute paid advertising, for example, but £30,000 is still a significant sum of money. One of the other ways that we're able to monetize our YouTube presence is through ad revenue. And the ad revenue, and I'm sure you've all watched YouTube, you see when you press play on a video, you'll get an advert served at the beginning, and basically Google pays us for basically allowing them to use using our content to basically carry advertising. So we get a cut of the money the advertiser pays Google, and videos actually generated us £1,300 in ad revenue, completely passive income. And again, you know, that would have, you know, more than covered the cost of production of these videos themselves. And we also know that these videos also generated 500 additional subscribers. Now, the other thing that's interesting about this is it would have assisted in gaining us around £96,000 in terms of other donations. We weren't just talking about the shop products, but we were also talking about other ways you can support the Tank Museum. I mentioned Patreon earlier. Our patronage grew by 9% between April and September. We also saw a surge of new members of our Friends of the Tank Museum scheme. And this whole period, I mean, I think all online retailers would have seen a huge growth in their online retail during the lockdown period for obvious reasons. But for us, this really was the beginning of a surge in online retail that we probably wouldn't have had. I mean, we certainly weren't doing any paid advertising for our online shop, but the growth that this format gave our online shop has actually led to us continuing to invest in our online shop, and has actually led to us getting some very pleasing results from that overall. And in fact, you know, we have to say that all of the activity, all of this fundraising activity is, you know, ultimately to save jobs, and you can't really say fairer than that at what has been an incredibly difficult time for the whole country, let alone the sector. So that is a very brief introduction to how one of the ways, I suppose, in which we looked to tackle lockdown. And yeah, I'd be very happy to take any questions. I hope that made sense as well.
Thank you, Nick. That was really good, really interesting. So if anybody's got any questions for Nick, you want to either raise your hand or pop a question in the chat. Oh, Anne, were you from Diving Museum? Were you about to ask a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask. I've actually tried to do videos like this myself before, and found two things very difficult. One, you have to look extremely glamorous and well kept when you're on screen, which generally I'm not. And the other thing is that it's very hard to talk for that length of time unscripted. So did he have a script that he was working from to do that?
So I mean, this is actually one of the kind of I mean, obviously I'm sort of a marketing guy. I do the technology, but I have to say, in our curator David Willey, we have a phenomenal asset. He never uses a script. He will say it himself, and I don't know if any of you have met him, but he can absolutely talk for England and probably the rest of Europe as well. So he is, like I said, an enormously gifted communicator, and that has, without question, you know, the presenter is a fundamental part of building an audience, of making your content successful. So he certainly has got that. I know of other YouTubes though who are finding that they are able to script things and use basic auto cue apps on phones and iPads and that kind of thing. So, you know, if you can't remember lines, don't be put off. There are sort of technological solutions out there which aren't expensive, which might allow you to get around it. And as for the sort of the appearance thing, you know, there's always going to be that pressure on presenters to kind of, you know, to look the part and that kind of thing. But, you know, social media is an authentic medium. And I think, you know, I mean, you know, David is our curator, looks like a traditional curator, in my opinion. He's got the beard, he wears the tweed. You know, I don't particularly see that as glamorous. However, it is very, very authentic. And in terms of growing your social media channels, that is exactly what people want to see. I look at things like Irving Finkel on the British Museum YouTube channel, exactly the same. You wouldn't call him glamorous, but he is authentic, and that's what people love.
Okay, fair enough. I'll wear goggles next time and a snorkel.
Why not? Have fun with it.
Yeah, I will.
A little question in the chat there from Kate at Lewis Priory. Obviously, there was a strong following on YouTube already before launching this particular initiative. Any advice on how to grow a YouTube audience from that kind of very low start?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we started from zero. I kind of tried to cover some of those points, albeit very, very briefly. But growing a channel is about perseverance. It's, you know, it's quite hard work. You have to find your niche, you have to build your audience, you have to give them what they want. And obviously a lot about that is about really understanding your audience, understanding what your niche is, and understanding what you can give that audience, which they can't get anywhere else already. And, you know, we have a big Facebook following as well, and our Facebook following has helped to kind of increase our YouTube following and vice versa. We're on all of the major sort of social media channels, and we like to cross-pollinate those audiences. We use our email list to grow our YouTube channel. We use, you know, we have plenty of signage on when we're actually allowed to be open. We have plenty of signage on site, on our leaflets, on our adverts, saying, you know, follow us on YouTube, subscribe. So it's all about that signposting piece that I mentioned earlier, as well as understanding what your niche is and understanding the right way to talk to your audience. And that takes experimentation.
Brilliant, thank you. Just having a quick check, got nobody else? Okay, brilliant. Well, Nick is going to be around, I think, for the rest of the session. So if there are other sort of things that come up, then we can go back to him. But thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you.
I think we will now move on to Katie. Katie from Chawton House, who's going to tell us a little bit about what they did pretty much on a shoestring over this last year. So Katie, over to you.
Thank you, Katrina, and that was really interesting, Nick. I'll pick up some of the points as well. Let me just share my screen. Right, can we all see that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Good. So I'm Katie Childs and I'm the Chief Executive of Chawton House. We're near Alton in Hampshire, so just between Hampshire and Surrey. And this really is from scratch in 5 weeks with no budget. I'll give you a sense of scale of us. So we're a kind of medium-sized organisation. We've got around about 16, 17 members of staff, turnover of about £500,000. And when we were closed on the 24th of March, we immediately lost 60% of our income because that's what came from visitors. And oh, that has gone.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, hold on a second. I might have to switch to yours at this rate. Katrina, right.
We can see it. Oh, yeah, we can see it now.
For those who don't know who we are, this is us. We are a Grade 2 star listed historic house, library and collection gardens, as you can see, but also 200-acre estate. We're probably most famous. We've got many different stories, but the property was owned by Jane Austen's brother, Edward, and he made a cottage available on the estate for his sisters. in 1809, and it is from that cottage that Jane Austen wrote the 6 novels that made her one of the most famous British authors of all time. At Chawton, we now have a collection of around about 16,000 works by early women writers, and it's a place that that Austen knew very, very well, frequented the estate, the gardens, and the house. So it's where you can sort of uniquely see all that influenced Jane Austen. Although we do much more than just Austen. And this is where we are. So you can see we're in the middle of a throbbing metropolis, and we've got absolutely no phone reception and very, very limited Wi-Fi, very temperamental Wi-Fi in the house. So we have never been particularly kind of technical or used digital program before, partly because our own infrastructure was a bit rubbish. And the extent to our digital program had always been just putting some of our works, some of our novels online. These are all books that you can read on our website. Some of them are brilliant. Paris Lions and London Tigers is absolutely fantastic. But as you can see from the length of that email, sorry, of that web address at the bottom, our website, which we've now since got some funding to update, our website was dreadful, and it didn't really suit suddenly launching a digital program. And we as a team hadn't done it before. Some of us had done it separately. I used to work at the Imperial War Museum and had done a big digital partnership project there. One of my colleagues she works for us part-time, and the other half of her time she's a lecturer. So we kind of pooled what knowledge we had between a team of 4 of us, and started immediately from lockdown to start to work on a digital program under the line that if you cannot come to Chawton House, we will simply have to bring Chawton House to you. And we wanted to be as upbeat as we could. We wanted to be positive, and we wanted to provide a little bit of escapism for at a time, if you do cast your mind back to the end of March and April last year, that people were really kind of scared in some ways, and that kind of comfort that good quality arts and culture can bring it was more important almost that we kept going rather than mothballed, which would have probably been the easier thing to do. So we started on social media, and I'll give you some of our social stats, because that's underpinned what has become the kind of income generating elements. So Cleo, my colleague, started a campaign to do a quote a day. She created a campaign called Rainbows of Hope, where she found different things in the collection related to the colours of the rainbow, one different colour every week, and then she just got other Hampshire organisations involved. She kind of tagged them in the first post and kept it going for 7 weeks. But it gave us a kind of core of something to do every day that people followed every day and that people could get involved in. And our social platforms have, as I said, have underpinned a lot of what we've done over the course of the last 12 months. So our Twitter following's gone up 16%, our Facebook following 28%, Instagram 30%, and our YouTube channel has had an increase in subscribers of 6,231%. Our mailing list subscribers up by 174%, and webpage views 74%. But critically for us, and knowing your audience is important, we know our audience is both British and to a lesser extent European, but we know we've got we had a potential to get to a really interested North American audience, partly because of Austen and partly because of early women writers. So our users of our website in the UK have gone up 39%, but of US users has gone up 57%. So it's been a big profile raising, and this started with Cleo's kind of quote of the day, and all of the design work that you'll see as I click through this, we've done in-house on a fairly aged design program, and Cleo and Kim and my former colleague Louisa taught themselves how to use it and taught themselves how to put these design packages together. So we haven't incurred the extra costs of using designers. We haven't used a kind of tech producers to produce content because simply we did not have the money. so yes, that shows her using different bits of the collection to tell stories, and it had a kind of nice academic core. We have a reading group that used to meet in person in the house, and we moved them online, and this was the start of kind of experimenting with how we could do the sorts of things we were doing on site online. Now, as you can see, it's our lovely Hampshire reading group. Now, Kim is the sort of second along in the black top on the top row. Now, I'm sure none of our reading group will mind me saying, but none of them were born after 1994, and so we figured that if our reading group was going to get to grips with Zoom and doing some content for them on Zoom and testing some stuff out for them, then we knew we could roll this out to a wider audience. We actually now have 2 reading groups, because we've got the Hampshire group who will come back on site, I hope, towards the end of this year, but we have a North American reading group. And although it's free for people to join, the numbers are limited because obviously that's the sort of thing you cannot have a large number of people. What we have noticed is that people, particularly who've joined the North American group, have been really good supporters, both in terms of financial support, but and also in helping kind of connect us and help find speakers, and it's connected people who were very sympathetic to Chawton House, but be able to talk to them every single month on the things that it is the reason that they love Chawton House. So they've just been discussing Eliza Haywood in the last month, and we do that once a month. So pardon me. So I'm kind of armed with that kind of confidence, but also maybe some of the naivety that none of the 4 of us have done this before. What we wanted to do was to do something really big in lockdown, and I was inspired, as you can tell by my accent. I'm not from these parts, and I was following what was happening around Greater Manchester, and I saw the United We Stream gigs that they were doing in Manchester, and I was like, surely if you can do a musical version of that, you must be able to do an online literary festival in lockdown. So we put together our lockdown literary festival for 3 days in May, and that gave us about 6 weeks to put the whole thing together. As I said, we'd not done it before, and the first 2 people we asked to take part said no, so we slightly panicked and then asked absolutely everybody we knew, which turned what was supposed to be a kind of maybe 1-day event into a 3-day event. And the whole point was to try and mimic what we would do at a literary festival on site, with a real mixture of pace and content, and also trying to relay what we do at Chawton House, which is both provide a platform for new and emerging writers, creatives, and for early career researchers, but with names that are household names, and also kind of Austin world names that people would recognise. So you can see our headliner for the Friday night was Joanna Trollope, who's one of our patrons. Now, we did the literary festival. We made a decision. This is the Saturday Sunday schedule. We made a decision that we were going to do it for free. And that was because of the time we were doing it. We're in the middle of lockdown. Again, as I said, people, we didn't want to, whilst we were closed, to put a barrier to people accessing this sort of good quality content. But what we did do is we created a ticket system. So we used art tickets, which has some quirks, but it is free, and therefore I definitely recommend it. And so people had to sort of sign up through art tickets. It meant that we could create a newsletter list, but we left on the donate box. And through kind of ticket donations, we raised about £4,000. And it was a snap decision. We didn't even really think about it. What we wanted to do with the literary festival was intersperse these films with fairly cheesy kind of little videos from me promoting ways in which you could support Chawton House. We absolutely, as Nick said, didn't want to do the whole, oh, what will become of us, Mrs. Bennet? We will never, what will happen? We're much more like Eleanor Dashwood, I think, at Chawton House. And instead, all the communications around our kind of fundraising and emergency appeal was that we were ineligible for all emergency support. We didn't receive any emergency support at all until August, which is more frightening now when you think when you look back and think about it, just how financially difficult that was. But we put it in a language that we were moving from being an organisation that was really dependent on on-site visits to one that would be, because we knew this wasn't a quick crisis, that would move to focusing more on online and outdoors, and then bring back the on-site when we were able to do so. And that was enormously successful. The emergency funding programme raised us, fund raised us around about £35,000, but it was positive. It wasn't kind of, because we knew there were people in far worse situations in sort of life and society than we were able to do. So the literary festival, as you can see, had a real mixture of different events and different pace. It's where we started to use the talk Q&A mixture. We did some on Twitter, which we've not done since, but what we do now is a pre-recorded talk and then a live Q&A, and that's we really got into through the literary festival. And we had over 2,000 people join us live for the weekend. Since the videos, the films are all on our YouTube channel. We've had over 50,000 people view the content from the literary festival, and I think it's a real game changer for Chawton House. We've never done anything like this, but so it's not just about the kind of financial aspect, but it was a real reputational gear change for us. But more to the point, it was a weekend where people across the world, we were joined by people across the world. Actually, Caroline Jane Knight's talk was so early on, because she's in Melbourne, that it was just really just joined people together and was really well received, and that's the sort of feedback that we got, and knowing that our loyal audience was one that maybe hadn't used the tech before, that this makes it, I still can't get through this without having a bit of a lump in my throat reading it, but that's what we wanted to do. What we've done since, though, is moved. So we did a garden festival about 2 weeks. If we knew how long lockdown was going to last over the course of the 12 months, we would have definitely done this later. But this is part of the transition from kind of wholly online to starting to open our gardens. But some of the garden content, particularly through two trails, has been two of our most popular films on our YouTube channel. So it was something that we kind of continued. Pat's one of our volunteers, so we really did get absolutely everybody involved. Loving the Shrubbery, one of the best titled things we've done. Kim Wilson is a very well-known Austin academic, so it shows the sort of different things that we were doing. The exceptions to the free content were the workshops you can see, so the writing workshops. I'll talk a little bit about those, but the first creative writing workshops for the literary festivals, when we advertised them, we sold out of them in an hour. So they clearly hit on something that people wanted to do. So along with the events, we also launched this used to be a kind of a paper publication, but we launched a digital publication, the Female Spectator, which we do 3 times a year. You can buy it from our shop, but it's also a thing that we give to our patrons and our supporters and friends, and it's a great way of kind of keeping in touch with Chawton House. So it added to the digital program, and then we started to begin to, as we opened the house, to begin to mix our content, and the content now is a mixture of free and paid content, and event content. So we did another day-long event in partnership with the Jane Austen Society. We're going to do that again this year, because they won't come back on site for their big annual AGM. And again, that was we did that as a free event, but we got a donation from the society, and that finished with a film where we got all of the international Jane Austen societies together for the first time, which is the sort of thing you just cannot do in real life. So we've really taken the opportunity of that, and honestly, that event was better online than it's been on site. It was a fantastic kind of global celebration of the author. So we turned into, as I said, we turned this into an ongoing lecture series, and we will keep doing this, partly because we've built an audience that cannot ordinarily cross the threshold, but that wants to have this continuing relationship with Chawton House. But we started to monetize it when we opened on site, because there wasn't the justification really for producing that amount of content for free. So we did summer series of talks and lectures, and as I said, what we do, we've kept it very simple, is we pre-record the talks. Kim and Cleo edit them, so they're a good production value. Again, it's all done on site, it's all done with freely available tech. And then we do the Q&As by Zoom. We sell the tickets through Art Tickets, and they get emailed the links and the passwords to the Q&A beforehand. One of the reasons we insist on pre-recording is because of the kind of dodgy Wi-Fi connections in different places, and we want to make sure that we've got content, and we have a co-host, just as John is to Katrina today, so that if either mine or Kim's Wi-Fi goes down, then we've got a backup and we can keep going. And then we make the content available in our new online shop. And that was in response to people asking if they could buy the content, and we wouldn't have thought about it anyway, of our own choice. And then we just started to experiment with all sorts of different things. So we do a podcast, which one of my youngest members of staff does. This is free, but we know that and this is why we want to keep that mixture of content. What we've been encouraging people to do is download this and then come and have a walk in the parkland. And we've got 6 of these. We've got another 6 coming. And then in the autumn, we started to get really creative. So what we're going to do now is have on-site and online program. So we always do a big Gothic season. If you come to Chawton in the dark, you'll understand why. And so it's all around the art of freezing the blood. And we moved away. We did one talk as part of the Gothic season, which had about 80 people sign up to it, which is kind of our average really for those talks. But we did some costume storytelling, which certainly gets over the script and appearance issue. And again, Louisa and Cleo did their own makeup and hair, and these are costumes we have anyway, and that's our fire with the lights turned off. So and we were reading content from the collection and keeping it core to why is Chawton House doing it, just as Nick said with the Tank Museum. It's got to be about tanks. For us, it's got to be about the history of the house, and its association with women writers. And then at Christmas, we started to do the same. We did Christmas storytelling. And this is Sasha, who is one of our general assistants. So she normally works in our tea room, but she told me she'd done her BTEC in performing arts. So she adapted herself one of our Christmas ghost stories that's in the collection. And we filmed that, and you can see from the filming we're not using very technical equipment. We've got a ring light off Amazon. That's Louisa's own phone. So it's we're not this has not cost us an awful lot of money. In fact, we bought that tripod. That's one of the few things we bought. We've since broken it. So maybe it's a good job we didn't continue to spend money. And then as when we did our business planning from September for the next sort of 18 months, we actually wrote 2 business plans. We wrote one which would go along the government's plan of head onwards to the sunlit uplands, and then we did one which was based on there being a lockdown in November and a lockdown now in January and February, which again focused online and outdoors. So we've done more events. So the evening, and all of this now is more or less it's paid content. So an evening with the Watsons was to celebrate Jane Austen's birthday, and that's a really nice mix of kind of academic content. We had an academic kind of looking at the unfinished novel, The Watsons, a bigger version of the reading group. But also then a writer, Rose Servitova, who's an absolute hoot. If that talks in our digital shop, it's definitely a good one to download. Where she'd done a completion of the Watsons, which is fantastic. We did a Christmas program again on site and online. So the paid bits were tours of the house dressed for Christmas, which I did, and then I did Q&As in small groups, so we could have kind of more of a nice kind of cozy fireside chats with people. Sasha's storytelling, as you saw, but the free content was a film on our YouTube channel that Emma, our curator, did around an exhibition that was up for a total of 10 days before it had to close. And Claire, the lovely lady in the bottom corner, is Claire Thaler, who does those workshops, and we now do 2 of those workshops every month. They sell out. We do 25 people per workshop, and we do 2 topics and 2 workshops per topic, and we just keep going with different themes and different things depending on the seasons. And she's got some loyal kind of continuous participants, and we charge for those and ticket split with Claire. And again, the talks continued, Walking Women with Kerry Andrews, but that's, again, we knew walking on site in January was going to be a thing, so let's do an online talk that continues that. We're continuing to vary, and this is where we're not earning money in this instance through ticket sales, because this is a conference, but we've got grant support from academic societies. I just love the title of this, although we did have to put in the long 18th century so that Google searches were less eye-watering. But again, this is Kim and her colleague Alison Daniel at Southampton, and this is going back to sort of kind of more traditional academic work. So we're getting involved in different audiences, and this is what we're doing kind of from now on. It gives you a sense of the in this lockdown of us produce. So the free content we're producing will be tours of our gardens that we've invested in, particularly spring flowering bulbs, so people can see that content for free. But the paid content is this program of writers talks and day-long events. So Mothering Heights is the lady on the left, who is Maria Bramwell, who's mother of the Brontes. And it shows the different kind of pace of talks that we're doing. So there are those you'd expect for the core Austen enthusiasts, the audience, looking at Martha Lloyd. There is the much more cerebral from Richard Ovenden, who's chief librarian of the Bodleian, who is talking about knowledge under attack. Something for this new development audience we're trying to bring in, which we've done through our exhibition this year, and that's Cross-Dressed to Kill. And then as I said, working with different sorts of writers and researchers, for Maria Bramwell and Lady Mary Wortley Montague. That's one of the portraits we have in our amazing portrait collection. And that's where you can find us. I'm very happy to answer questions, and also for you to have a look kind of online, see what we've done, see some of the content. And as I said, we have bought a slightly better upgrade to our Zoom accounts. We bought a tripod we broke and a ring light, and that is the extent of the budget that we've been able to put towards the programme. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Lovely, thank you, Katie. Does anyone have any questions for Katie? Either kind of raise your hand or put them in the chat. Go on, Anne from Diving Museum. Oh, I think you're still on mute, Anne. Are you able to unmute yourself?
Sorry, I apologise for being the only person to ask questions, but I'm curious to know what sort of video editing software you use.
So Kim uses iMovie, which she absolutely hates, but she's very good at it. So she uses iMovie. What we are going to do is we're going to buy a couple of subscriptions to, and she's looking at the moment into something that's more suitable, and then training not just the 4 of us who make content, but some of our younger staff. We have a team of general assistants who, as the name suggests, do a bit of everything from shop, tea room, but they're obviously really good on digital content because they're 17 to 24 years old. So we're going to train everybody in it, and that is one thing that we that we will invest in. I should say this kind of positive can-do, let's fill a programme, let's build an audience, and let's make it as varied as we possibly can, has just turned into quite a substantial donation to Chawton House, specifically to fund our academic and public programme, and that is to kind of transition us back to a slightly more normal business thing. So it is business plan. So it's not just the income you generate through ticket sales, but I think it's, as Nick was saying, it's something that's about your reputation and about being kind of keeping going, and not doing the whole understanding that absolutely all of us are in the same boat in this crisis. We've all lost visitors, lost income, lost profile, and so for us it was a way of keeping going. Also, I don't know what we would have done, all of us individually, if we were left to work at home and not have anything to do. So that's definitely what when we were doing the literary festival, it was so good for us individually, because it gave us a real focus and on something positive. And I should say, on your unscripted question that you asked Nick, we do some of our costume tours are unscripted because they're the sort of thing we do regularly in the house. But we did a lot that was unscripted at first, and then decided that it was much better for us to script our films, certainly our tours. And then that meant it was easier for the people editing, because they could fit in, editing images and music and that sort of thing. But actually it just made it a lot easier to film. And in terms of looking glamorous, well, clearly I don't, but doing it in costume has definitely worked, and there's an appeal to that as well. I'm not quite sure though with diving, it's not an area of my expertise, I'm sorry.
It can be done, but it's a little bit more awkward walking around in fins.
Well, also my sound might be an issue. Actually, the one thing I would say, and we sometimes struggle with, is getting good sound quality. But that's really, of all the production, that's something that we really want to try and improve. The other thing is, if you don't want to appear yourself, we've done some audio sort of tours, which are, in fact, Cleo's editing one today, where I've recorded the audio on my phone, and my phone is not a particularly, it's just a normal Samsung phone, and then she's putting it over basically a kind of PowerPoint of slides and music. So that's one other way in which you could do it.
Okay, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Oh, sorry, was there a...
Oh, sorry, can I ask
Go on, Shelley.
With all of the people that you got in to do various talks in the conferences and things like that, were they all people who were already, you mentioned that Joanna Trollope is one of your patrons, so were they all people that were sort of already associated with Chawton House?
No. Oh, sorry, carry on, Shelley.
No, I was just going to, because obviously that wasn't mentioned in your budget, so I wondered if they were already associated, or whether they just, you approached them and they were happy to just take part in the events.
Yeah, so there's I think there were 2 or 3 we did pay to do so, but they were particularly, that was more our choice, where they were early career there's 2 playwrights we worked with in the summer, and then a playwright actress for the Garden Festival. We gave a stipend for those. So no, some people we didn't know beforehand. So Kerry Andrews, for example, we didn't know, but we were introduced to her. So this has been a real network building. Rating our networks, but no, we started from the people we knew. So obviously Joanna Trollope, Natalie Jenner, people we knew were sympathetic to Chawton or had been inspired by Chawton, and then we looked at people who contributed to our exhibitions. We used to run a visiting fellow scheme, so we went back through that. My predecessor as director, she was one of the speakers. There was a number of our volunteers who again were just very happy to do something. I mentioned Caroline Jane Knight. She used to live, and she's the Knight family own the freehold of the house. So no, we worked out from people, from staff, and from people and volunteers. And then when we built it, we started to get people proactively saying, could we take part? We've got a new book, could we take part? So that's where I showed the talk about Martha Lloyd. And then Richard Ovendon's a former trustee. So we sort of really went through every network and every, not just from this job, that there's you notice in the literary festival, there's a fair amount of Second World War, which was hangover from my Imperial War Museum.
Oh, I see.
So, oh no, we were utterly shameless, and particularly when the content was free, that's kind of easier. But no, Sharon Wright's doing kind of Mothering Heights for us to coincide with Mother's Day. So we're doing a whole package around Mother's Day, which is a mixture of kind of catering and online stuff. But Sharon's a big supporter of Chawton House, and I said, would you mind doing it? And she said, oh God, yes, I'm so bored. So yeah, we've definitely benefited from that.
Excellent, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katie. I'm really kind of conscious of time, and I want to give Lisa a good amount of time. There's another little question in the chat, Katie, which you might be able to answer back in the chat.
Yeah, I will do.
That's all right. But I think you did certainly answer from Kate, so that's brilliant. So, really interesting, really giving us some food for thought. We'll move on to Lisa from Southampton Museum and Art Galleries. And actually, we've got a really different kind of take, I think, on some of the online content that they've been doing. So Lisa, over to you.
Part of Southampton Cultural Services. So that's my first slide. Have the next slide, please. And basically, I've just put up, we're part of the City Council, so we're part of a much bigger sort of organisation. My team specifically really work across the museums that I've highlighted there. So Tudor House Museum and Gardens, Sea City Museum and the City Art Gallery. And essentially day in, day out, we're doing learning activity. And then we get involved with a lot of the sort of wider things I put on there at the moment. Southampton's very involved with the City of Culture bid. Last year we had Mayflower 400 programme going on, and that's something that's still going on. There's obviously the wider city collections, archaeology. So that we're just part of a much bigger organisation. If I could have the next slide, please. So essentially just what we were doing day in and day out. I'm just going to tell you very briefly what we were doing, because that kind of leads into what we have been doing. We are basically school visits, but alongside that we were doing a lot of community projects, so working with vulnerable adults. Within the team there's myself, there's 2.5 learning and engagement officers, and also the volunteer coordinator sits in my team as well. So that's why we have quite a large volunteering programme. Alongside the kind of group and school activity, we were doing a lot of family and adult learning. So those are our, we would do symposiums, we would have life drawing at the weekends, all the kind of ticketed events that people come to as individuals. Then depending on what exhibitions we have in the venues, we have deeper engagement projects, and they've carried on going as well throughout lockdown. And we also do a lot of sort of thinking about employing, we employ a lot of local freelancers, so get involved in creative industries, and we also do quite a lot of kind of career advice for the universities and groups that we work with. So that's kind of where we were. Can I have the next slide, please? And then we had March 2020. This is a really old picture from our collections, but it kind of summed up what happened to us. So we had to kind of look to the past, to what we were doing, and then we were winging it. We were in costume, kind of winging it, and that's what we've done for the last year. And if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. We faced quite a lot of barriers, I'm sure, as you all have, when we first went into lockdown. The first one was time. We obviously wanted to start taking everything online, and that's what the world was doing, but we realized it took us a lot longer than we thought to put things online. Just the planning, human resources. So I'm not particularly tech savvy. We've got work laptops, but at the time we had absolutely nothing, and we didn't have, so we didn't, although we had our social media channels, we had Facebook and we had our Twitter accounts, we really only used them for going, oh, here's an event, buy tickets. And we didn't really do that massively successfully. So we weren't geared up in terms of the human resources. We had to sort of start putting all this content out there. into the world. We didn't really know how. We also didn't have the physical resources, so that's a really old ice skate from our collection, but that's kind of how we felt the whole way through going through this. Every time we wanted to put something online, you know, we've been using our own, as you all have, our own phones, our own laptops. I would normally do this if I was teaching. I would normally do it on my personal laptop because for obvious reasons, as we've just seen how my laptop reacts to Zoom. So it was a struggle in the first instance. Just we probably had all the same questions that some of you have had about how to edit, how to do this, how to do that. We were really just faced with our smartphones. Obviously, financially, the venue shut. So as much as we knew what we needed to buy to be able to do things, we were up against, well, the venues are shut, we're making no income. So you kind of got this chicken and egg situation. And marketing ground to a halt. We had, I'll touch a bit more on marketing in a minute, but that's kind of where we were. All our paper-based marketing, obviously no one was coming in to pick it up. We weren't doing anything in book bags. We just sort of had nothing. So that's kind of where we were. If I could have the next slide, please. Really thrilled I did an animation on this one. Now I can't click through each of them as I'd want to. Yay. So how we face the challenge. So really we looked at opportunities and new ways of working. And I would like to say we took a strategic approach, but I think probably we took a scattergun approach. And we kind of panicked because we knew we wanted to keep on engaging with people. So we just tried everything. We just started trying stuff. So we put our online class, sorry, I'm going to ask you to click and click and click. We put our online classes on, so if you could click to that one. So that's a little snapshot there of Bea and Andy on their laptop. So we started doing online classes, and I'll touch more on those in a minute. We improved our website. So straight away, we didn't have any kind of way of even putting online videos on our website. So we had to look at the web pages and think about how we would use those. And alongside being able to put up resources, we also looked at how we could do online exhibitions. I'm just touching on all this quickly, but it's all kind of, which people already talked about, that bigger picture of, we weren't just going for one audience. By going for lots of different audiences, one thing feeds the other, and it just starts to grow organically. You know, someone who might look at one of your online resources might then come to one of your sessions, might then see something on social media. It's all kind of a web, I found. Next slide, next click, please. So we also looked at how resilient our offer could be in terms of our community audiences. So that's one of our learners who goes to a charity called Headway, but we started dropping off packs to people. So we would make packs of art resources or heritage sessions, whatever they might be, and then we worked with groups in the community to be sending those out. But in turn, that then generated people who then might come to our online talks in the evening. So it was all interlinked. If I could have the next click, please. New systems. So we had all our ticketing was done on the phone. People would phone up or they'd come into the venue and buy a ticket. So we had to look at how we could sell tickets, and we started using We Got Tickets for that. And we rely heavily on that at the moment because we stopped putting anything in print. So now if people want to find out the information that they would have found out about what we're offering through looking at our brochure, they now go to We Got Tickets to look at. Also because our websites were quite clunky. So just having all the changing lists of things that we were having to update constantly and change dates, even having that on our websites was not really working for us. So we do use We Got Tickets, and we do pay them a little cut of the ticket price. If I could have the next slide, please. So social media, so we already had our Facebook and we had Twitter, which we were kind of using a bit, but not really in the engagement kind of way. And we changed the way we use them. So we very much moved to looking at how we could use those platforms to allow audiences access to our collection. So I guess links to what people were saying about authentic. So everything we were putting out on social media, we were linking back to the art collection or the historical collections, whatever it might be. But then we started on new social media channels. So particularly our YouTube channel. So we didn't have a YouTube channel, so we opened one. And they're kind of different to the Tank Museum because they're very short videos, but that's because we put the videos on our social media and then we try and drive people back to the YouTube channel and vice versa. So we didn't want them to be really, really long. We do have longer talks and tours on there, but we've got them on private playlists, so you wouldn't see them if you sort of looked around our channel, but we use those with our schools. So I'll talk about that slightly later on. If I could have the next click, please. We've also reviewed our services. So this year, for the first time, we've done a service level agreement with schools, which we're just waiting for feedback on. So far, I know we've got 3 schools from Southampton signed up, because we wanted to, thinking about income and schools, we wanted to try and guarantee some income. I don't know how everybody else works, but we're very much school phones up, say they want to come and book, and we go, yay, great. So we wanted to know we were getting a definite level of income coming in at the beginning of the year. And if I could have the next slide, please. Next click, please. Oh. Next, there should be one more. Oh, partnership. Sorry, it's already there. So we also looked at partnerships. So what I mean by that is we looked at who within the council, our local council, we could partner with to get us more exposure. So what you can see there is my colleague Kate sitting in the education work, but she's making poppy pinwheels because things shut down that would normally happen. So they started coming to us to make videos for content for things like well, city events basically. So obviously that was Remembrance Day, and we made the Poppy Appeal video. But because then the council shared it on their channels, it was getting more people back in. So it's this whole kind of cycle of raising our profile, and we tried to make partnerships with people that we knew would raise the profile of what we were doing. Sorry, if you can have the next slide now, please. Thank you. It's difficult talking when you can't control the slide. So our online public programme, at the moment, we've been going for, when did we start? Around May kind of time, I would say we really started going last year. So evening talks, we do a lot. So these are all ticketed events that we basically advertise. I'll touch on how we market them in a minute, but basic ticketed events. So someone goes and books their individual ticket. Oh, sorry. We do evening workshops as well for adults. And we've looked at whether people want to buy a single sessions or courses. We do after school weekday clubs, and we didn't do those before at all. And we do holiday activities that we were doing before, but now we've taken them online as well. Things that we really had to consider were time. So we don't do things at the normal times we would do. So we didn't do any after school clubs before because it just wasn't practical. The venue shut at 5. By the time someone gets there after school, you know, there's no time, everybody's stressed out, end of day. And that's something that really online has allowed us to do, is actually cater to what's best for our audiences as opposed to what fits around when our venues are open. So before we didn't do a lot of evening talks because to open the art gallery in the evening, I had to pay all the staff to be there. It was not financially viable. Whereas now we can do an evening talk, you know, sat from the comfort of our homes, and we're getting much higher numbers than we ever would have done before. You know, we average about 50 people to an evening talk, and we do those once a week at the moment. We do heritage ones one week, and then we do an art one the next week, on and off. And Padmini, who's on here, is one of our lovely speakers, who's just doing an advert for your talk, Padmini, coming up. And also with the kids clubs as well. So as I said, we wouldn't normally have run them, and they're proving really popular. And we realised that obviously a lot of children were out of school, but some children were as well. And through that, we've picked up not just children who are still going to school and children who aren't in school, but also a large home education audience that we didn't have before either. It's really for home education. We weren't very successful at engaging home education groups before, whereas now it's completely taken off. So that's been something that's quite interesting for us. We don't run the sessions for as long as we would have. I mean, talks are probably about the same time, maybe an hour or so, but give or take with questions. But kids stuff, we don't do like 2-hour family sessions like we would have done before. It's normally 40 minutes to an hour online. In terms of our pricing for our events, for adults, we looked at tiered pricing. For some talks, we do 4 options, so free, and then 3 different price brackets. So it's normally around £4.50, £5 to £6.50, £7.50 to £8.50, something like that. And we generally find that people go about the middle one. So we had to think about that strategically. It's kind of like you want to give people the option to be free, but you kind of want to guilt them into paying the middle price so they feel okay about themselves, but also it's not the cheap price. And we also offer multiple bookings for things. So with not all of the sessions, but some of the sessions, we run them as courses so people can buy them in a block, but we also allow them to buy individual sessions as well. And obviously you pay slightly cheaper for the block. And that's worked pretty well, especially for the kids clubs as well. Also where some people, you just don't know, it's such a changing picture at the moment. It gives people that flexibility. In terms of content and keeping interest and encouraging engagement, the adult talks are pretty similar. They're talks. But what we do with some of them, if we know they're going to run longer, is we allow kind of a break in the middle and people to ask questions, because obviously then you're not being talked at for such a long amount of time. In terms of how we keep children engaged online, it's a real mix of activities. So it's always a slide-based presentation, and in that we try to embed video clips, we try to embed sound bites. We do a lot of polls with the children, so we ask their opinions, and they can either click on the poll to say what their view is. So for instance, I might hold up an object and I give them 3 different options. Some of them are like really silly, and then they guess which they think is the right one, and they really get into it. And if that doesn't work, they can just do true or false, or worst case scenario, they can go like that. You know, you find ways around doing it when the technology is failing, which happens a lot. We also do a lot of activities. So bearing in mind that people won't have art materials at home, everything we do is pretty much based around pencils, felt tip pens, scissors, that kind of thing. If we were going to do something that requires specific activities, then we would send it out to them beforehand. But generally it's just pencils and paper. And we found that works around about 40 minutes to an hour, works with children. Can I have the next slide, please? So how we've marketed our public programme. I said all our paper-based marketing disappeared, and it hasn't really been replaced with anything. It's just looking at what we were already using and using it smarter. So we already had a weekly email called Culture Vulture that the council sends out, and it tells people about stuff and what was going on. But we've relied on that heavily, and we've been trying to grow the subscriptions to that. But also it's just a social media channel. So my team have learned how to use whatever like little video things you can get on your phone. It's just these free apps that you download, and we make little videos and put them on and share them on the social media pages. And that's really the only way we've marketed. We find, because we ask people when they come to sessions how they found out, and it's normally social media, word of mouth, or the Culture Vulture, the e-newsletters. That's what we're finding is working for us. If I could have the next slide, please. I'll just quickly talk through this. So audiences have grown. You can see the red is obviously where we are, Southampton, but you can see it's spreading wider, and now it's starting to spread even wider. So that's one of the bonuses. And you know, we won't go back to taking everything on offline, because we've just found that we can engage with far more people, which has been brilliant. If I could have the next slide, please. So what this is basically showing you is around, if you're looking at the blue line where it kind of spikes at a peak, that's the previous week. And what we found with online is you've really got to hold your nerve, because people don't book until that far. You know, people book quite close to the actual event. So it's kind of like, it's a bit Braveheart. I'm going to everybody, hold the line, don't cancel the event. And you're like there on tenterhooks. And that's what we find the week before it kind of starts to pick up. So you've just got, but the advantage of online is I haven't spent about 10 years trawling around IKEA or the range trying to find whatever materials I needed in a complete panic because they hadn't turned up off Amazon. So, you know, pros and cons to the situation. If I could have the next slide, please. This just shows you very briefly the kind of number of events we've run. This is about a month old now, but you can see the red is children, family events, and the black is adults. So it's about 50-50. We have run slightly more adult events, but the income and the ticket sales, the black is adults and the red is children. One, that is obviously down to the number of people you can have in sessions. Like in a kids session, I mean, that said, we ran a Titanic one in half term. We had 34 screens on that, and it was fine actually. But generally with talks, you get more people, but also the income, we're just making far more money off of adult activities than we were before. So, you know, we have been a bit mercenary, and we have kind of concentrated on that a bit more because, you know, needs must at the moment, really. If you could have the next slide, please. So in terms of schools and groups, we kind of just started. We just thought, oh, what can we do? And we had a lot of bookings already. So I'll touch on that in a minute. But essentially what we're doing is we have 3 different things. We do Armchair Tours, which are groups. So it might be a WI group or men in sheds. We're talking a lot to men in sheds at the moment. And they sit in their sheds and drink beer, and we talk at them. And history lessons, so they're very much Titanic, but also we have done quite a bit of Tudors picking up. We're getting asked for things by various schools, and art workshops as well. I said history and art workshops about an hour, the tour's about 40 minutes. If you could have the next slide, please. That's Kate sat in her attic there. How we've reached schools and groups, we converted all our existing bookings. So we panicked, we phoned everybody, and we either tried to make them book later in the year or turn online. We cold called. So I got on the phone and I just phoned schools and said, hello, I'm Lisa from blah, blah, blah. We're doing online sessions, and just started planting the seeds. We changed all the web pages immediately. So when people went onto our web pages, the online information was hopefully one of the first things they'd see. We have mailed, we have emailed, we've basically stalked schools and groups in any way humanly possible that we could. We have, our bookings officer Googled Southampton and found anywhere in the world that had Southampton linked to it and sent them emails if there was a history society there. Word of mouth as well. We've worked with kind of the history coordinators for some of the, what are they called, the local authorities, and tried to spread by word of mouth. And we've targeted emails to schools as well. So we've done a lot of reaching out to get that business back in. But our bookings officer has been amazing with convincing people. And what we had to do first of all was we did a couple of free ones, just to make sure that we weren't terrible at it and we could actually charge people. And now so schools pay £80 for an hour-long session, and we're doing quite a few at the moment. We've got 2 today, 3 yesterday. At the moment, we're pretty solid with bookings, but we are going into the next few weeks into kind of a limbo phase of, and that's for obvious reasons. Nobody knew until, you know, day before yesterday that the schools were going back. So it'll be interesting to see what will happen. But I definitely think we will carry on with the online sessions, simply because we're reaching schools that are further away. So we have got some that do crazy drive times. Like there's one that comes from Wales every year. They drive two hours, nuts, and then back again. But I think now they'll probably stay online because it makes sense, really. Could I have the next slide, please? So the future for us, birthday parties online. We did a kids' birthday party in California a couple of weeks ago, and I think we'll carry on doing that, much to the dismay of the team. But it's working, and people, again, with us, we have the Titanic, and that's what's fortunate for us. People are interested in it. It has global appeal, so it's sticking to what's authentic to you, like everybody else has said, really, and just doing that to the best of your ability. We've also started experimenting with virtual reality. So the Perseus series, Burne-Jones, is the first one we've got up on the Art Gallery website at the moment, but it's basically like Google Earth, so you can plonk yourself in the bearing room and walk around and click on the paintings. And I think we're hoping to get, well, I'm hoping to get the Sea City Museum on there, a tour up the clock tower as well. So there's still things that we can use to carry on doing this afterwards. As I said, I don't think there'll ever be any going back for us now. We'll just have another, so not only are we doing in-house and outreach, we've now got online too, just to add to everybody's stress levels. But no, as much as it's been a bit of a baptism of fire, it's been really positive in terms of our audience engagement, and you know, it's just showing what's possible, really, when you're forced into a brave new world. Stop talking now.
Brilliant, thanks, Lisa. I'll stop sharing, and then I've spotted there's some stuff up in the chat. No particular questions. So if anybody has got questions for Lisa, please do raise your hand or pop it in the chat. David, I saw I think there was a clap, was it, rather than a raised hand? Any questions for Lisa? Is that Karina? Have you got a question there?
We've also been trying to use and engage with schools at the present time. So do you use YouTube closed channels and then let teachers view the videos that way, or is it all Q&As?
So it's normally live sessions. So we deliver on Zoom, Google Meet, Jitsu, Teams. Basically, we say, what are you using? They go this, and if we know what it is, we go yes, and if not, we'll go, oh, panic, and then we figure out how to use it. But we pretend that we can use it when they inquire. So we're winging it, basically. But we also have had some schools who didn't want to do live sessions, so we've produced videos for them, The thing is, once you've done it once, so now we've got a Titanic video and we sell it to them. So I think for that, we sold it to them for £80 and they get access for, I think it's a term, we said. And that's on a private YouTube channel, and then we'll take the link down, or we'll just change, you know, just take it down and reload it. So yeah, so it's been a mixture of both, but predominantly it's live sessions. So yeah, and that was happening before we went into complete lockdown again. So we've been doing the school sessions a lot since September last year, and it's a real mixed bag. When before we went into proper lockdown again, it was us on one screen and the class on another screen, for the schools that didn't want outreach. And now it's a complete mix, and it is quite, you have yourself, and then you've got the class, and then you've got all these other kids at home. So we try and keep it to one class, but we have done bigger groups, but we try not to because it's just a bit crazy. But yeah, it's pretty much live sessions. So we talk for an hour, and then we let them have any questions at the end. But if we've got another class lined up straight away, then we say, or if you don't know what the question is that they're asking you, say, oh, what an interesting question. Can you email it to me and I'll get back to you?
That's brilliant. I have to remember that one.
What a wonderful question. Ooh. And internally you're thinking, ah.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Lisa? Lovely. I have to say, I love the fact that Southampton started their sort of charging for those adult workshops just by, you know, what are you willing to pay? And actually the free option, not everybody went for the free option. People did go for the sort of the middling option. So I thought that was really, really cunning.
I guess what I would say about that is we went into, oh, the venues are shut, put everything out for free. And then we realised that we were all exhausted and we put loads of free content out. And the venues didn't look like they were going to open anytime soon. So that's when we realised we had to shave. But there was a lot of guilt. There was a lot of this kind of weird, guilty conversations that went on about charging for anything. And it has been really difficult to get our kind of price points for stuff. And originally, a lot of the team wanted to offer free tickets as well. But we were saved by the fact that we couldn't really do that very successfully through We. Oh, no, that's it. We didn't want to do free tickets. We wanted to do pay what you feel. But we couldn't do that through We Got Tickets. So in one way that kind of saved us from ourselves and forced us to charge people. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important you actually do value the time, you know, and the input you're putting in. Heather from the Lightbox just asked if you charge the same for online as in person. I think she's probably thinking about the £80 school visits.
Yep, it's £80 for a school workshop. Online it's £80 in-house as well. Depending on the venue, the gallery is free. So depending on the venue, you might have additional entry on top as well, but all three venues have all got 3 different entry systems, usefully. But yeah, it's the same. Yeah.
And then one final question, I think from Celia, a bit more about the booking system you're using.
For public activities, we use We Got Tickets, which is, I mean, if you just Google We Got Tickets, it'll come up. The reason we went with them and we didn't use Eventbrite was because we had to ask, we looked into a variety of different ticketing systems, and we basically realized that We Got Tickets had really good customer service, and we didn't have to wait ages for a response. So we tend to panic about stuff quite a lot. So we needed people who would respond to us quickly. So that's why we went with them. They weren't the cheapest, but they're not the most expensive. You know, it's worked out fine, and they've been really helpful. So for school bookings, it's same as normal. Phone us, and then we just invoice them, or well, yeah, invoice them.